His New York Times best-selling book, Work Rules: Insights from Inside Google to Transform How You Live and Lead, has been published in 24 languages and garnered numerous Book of the Year honors. From 2006 to 2016, Laszlo was Senior Vice President of People Operations and a member of Google's management team, growing the company from 6,000 to 72,000 employees, and ensuring the firm's culture remained innovative and robust throughout. During his tenure, Google was recognized over 150 times as an exceptional employer, including being named the #1 best company to work for in the United States 7 times, and every year since 2012, which was when I joined, so just hold on to that one. It must have something to do with this. Laszlo is credited with creating the field of people analytics, the application of academic quality rigor and Google-paced innovation to people management. He also led development of the Google Cloud Jobs API and what is now known as Google for Jobs, with the goal of solving unemployment by better matching people and jobs through applied machine learning and people analytics. He joined Google from the General Electric company, and beforehand was a management consultant at McKinsey & Company, probably a better management consultant than what you heard from me earlier. He has served on the boards of Pomona College, Evolve, and whoops, I'm gonna mispronounce this one. I'm just gonna scoot right by it. Another one. In 2010, he was named Human Resources Executive of the Year, and in 2015, the HR Professional of the Decade. He briefly was ranked #1 in the world in the video game Assassin's Creed. Laszlo earned a bachelor's degree in international relations from Pomona College, graduating in 3 years, and an MBA from the Yale School of Management. Please join me in welcoming Laszlo.
That was great. I wish my mom could have heard all that. That was terrific. How's everyone doing? Okay, nothing standing between lunch and you except me. So I just have like 200 or 300 slides I want to walk you through. It is, I was going to say it's great to be here. It's super weird, actually, to be back at Google. I left at the end of the year, and I don't even think they had this building at the time. So it's kind of, I just got to get that off my chest. It's also great to be here. It's actually a real privilege because there's a long history of teaching and caring about education in my family and in my own life. And so more than anything else, I want to thank all of you for the work you do every single day for all these kids who are the future of this country. And I'm sure you've heard this again and again and again, but it's the most important job there is on this planet. My mother was a teacher. I was born in Romania, and she was an English teacher. And we defected. We snuck out. We stayed in a refugee camp in Austria. We came to the United States in 1974. And my mother and her side of the family are Jewish. And what she always, and so, if you're from Europe, and, my mom was born in 1945, she had lost chunks of her family in the Holocaust. They were murdered in the Holocaust. And my mom always raised me with the phrase, they can never take away your education. That's the one thing whoever they are, can never take away. So what you're doing is the most important thing there is out there. I dabbled a little in education when I was in high school. I worked as a summer school teacher for 3 years, teaching a debate program and a forensic debate thing the school had set up. I spent a summer teaching in Japan, teaching English like everyone does. I did a bunch of tutoring. This'll sound weird, but I remember there was one guy I tutored, and my gift to him at the end of the tutoring was a copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X, which coming from me was probably a pretty weird thing for him. But he years later followed up with me and thanked me for that. And the impact you have, as you know, you don't feel in that year all the time. You feel it 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, if you're lucky enough to have students come back. So I'm incredibly grateful for the work you do, and it is a sincere honor to be here and be talking to you. So I hope you find it helpful. I did leave Google fairly recently, and this was my mission when I was at Google. So I led people operations, and this was it. And the way we came up with this mission, find people, grow them, keep them. We had our first global get-together for the people operations team. And literally 30 minutes before it, we had no idea what our unifying mission was going to be. And this amazing woman named Judy Gilbert said, isn't it just these 3 things? And so the unifying spirit behind everything we did was find exceptional people, Grow them as fast and as much as you can. Give them the tools, the capabilities, the experiences to get better, and then keep them here as long as possible. I recently left Google at the end of last year, and a few months ago started a company called Humu. Not an education company, unfortunately, and we're actually still in stealth, so I can't say too much about it. But the underlying idea is how to make work better and the experience of work better for everyone in every environment. And eventually, there may be some education applications for students, but I guess the stakes are a lot lower when dealing with grown-ups than with kids. And so we start with grown-ups, and then maybe we eventually work our way to kids. But if you want to learn more, it's at, you can sign up to learn more at humu.com. What I really want to talk about is an epiphany I had when I was at Google, which is we spend more time working than we do anything else in our lives. And it's a little crazy because think back to when you're like in junior high school or high school. You're first starting to discover that there's other people in your life you might want to be romantically involved with. And you start caring about stories like Romeo and Juliet, and you start thinking like somewhere out there, there is someone for me. And I'm going to find that perfect person, and I'm going to dedicate my life to that person. And I'm going to be fulfilled and happy. And then you grow up, and you find the person, usually, and you never get to see him. Because you spend all your time with all these bozos you got to work with day in and day out. And there's a member of our team at Humu who, among other things, she was a fourth grade teacher for a few years at a local charter school. And she said, yeah, this is a good chart, but what you should tell the teachers is it really should just be work and sleep. Like the teachers don't get the other stuff. But it seemed wrong to me that for too many people, it's a bad experience. Work is a means to an end. Amy Recency, who's a professor at Yale University, did a study that found in every profession, about 30% of people find meaning in it, other 2/3, not so much. And even in professions you would expect, everybody is fired up about the meaning, right? Like nursing, like medicine, right? Like it's fine, I understand lawyers, 2/3 of them don't care. But for teachers, for people in ministry, only about 1/3 of them, right? Because it's hard to sustain that your whole career. You have bad days, you have bad moments. It just becomes a job after the first 15 or 20 or 25 years. And so what we tried to figure out while I was at Google was, how do you solve this problem? How do you make it better? And so they were kind enough to let me write a book called Work Rules. And the idea here was to find some science and some information about Google's experience, but more importantly about the rest of the world, about what works to make work better. So there's a bunch of stuff in here. The only reason I'm mentioning it is all the money goes to charity. Actually, the publisher keeps whatever they want, but I have donated and will continue to donate all my money to charities related to refugees and immigration issues, to educational access, so giving kids who otherwise wouldn't have access to education or better educational opportunities, and to veterans charities. So. It really, like, because it's, you know, there's a good chunk of this which is Google stuff, which isn't my story to tell, and it felt like, you know, it's not mine to profit from either. So this is some of the stuff that's in there. There's more in the book. I'm going to touch on a few of these rules that I think are particularly apropos to teaching and the profession of not just being in the classroom, but administering and running educational institutions. And then we'll have Q&A time, and I'm totally happy to debate and discuss and learn if I'm completely wrong on this stuff, because I imagine I'm probably, you know, 50 to 100% wrong on the education piece. So I look forward to that part of the discussion. But whenever I talk about this stuff, and whenever people come to Google, right, you guys have seen the beanbags, you've seen the lava lamps, you've seen, like, you know, like clearly this company spends money on people. And I was once giving a talk in Chicago to a group of heads of HR, and somebody said, you know, well, you know, yeah, Google, you can do this. You got all the money in the world. You got 30% profit margins. You're everywhere. Of course, you can do all these things to make work better for your employees. You know, I'm an insurance company. I'm a state pension fund. I can't do this. And before I could respond, somebody stood up in the room and raised his hand and he said, well, actually, basically what they're talking about is giving people freedom. And freedom is free. Giving people in your workforce more freedom doesn't cost you anything except giving up a little bit of control and allowing them to do things. And then in the course of writing the book and being at Google in sessions like these, there's all these companies from very different industries, very different businesses, very different economics, who look very different from Google, but feel very similar. So my favorite example is a company called Wegmans. Is anyone here from the Northeast? Any Wegmans fans?
Just went to one, it was awesome.
He said he just went there, it was awesome. In 2006, Google was named for the first time the best company to work for in America. And the year before, Wegmans had been named best company to work for. So I was asked to be on a panel together with this guy named Jack DePeters, who's the COO of Wegmans. And the person organizing the panel thought we would like go at it, right? Because Google, 30% margins, everyone's got a master's degree or PhD. People at the time went to fancy schools. That's changed a little bit. Kind of the company recruits more broadly now, thank God. And Wegmans, it's a high school educated workforce largely. They promote from within. It's family owned. It's a grocer, so they have 1 or 2% profit margins. And they put us on stage, and every question, how do you think about hiring? Well, these are the things we look at. We look for people who are conscientious and thoughtful, go the extra mile. Yeah, we do too. How do you think about promotion? We want people who really care about their customer. We really care about the user. Everything we went through, we do too, we do too. And Jack and I have since become friends. Completely different company, completely different industry, completely different economics, completely different workforce. Exactly the same in terms of how we treat our people and the experience people have. And they do it without a ton of money. So I want to share 3 examples, 3 kind of rules, things to take away that I hope will be helpful. The starting point is finding meaning in people's work. And I talked about Amy's research. This is the most important thing. And yeah, everyone says, okay, yeah, check, we should have meaning in work. That's important. I want to give you a sense of 2 pieces. One is what's important in setting up a mission, and the second is the impact this can have. So Google's mission is organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. What's amazing about that is you're never going to achieve that goal because there's always more out there. So a mission needs to be unattainable, right? It needs to be something you can always kind of move towards, but you never quite get there. If your goal is to be like the #1 rated school in the town or the district or the state or the nation, once you get there, where do you go from there, right? The second thing is having a strong, profound mission that is different from the other institutions around you is a filter for people who are applying. It makes people want to be there because there's something different about your institution. So even in education, every school is different. The students are different, the parents are different, the community is different, the level of support is different, the faculty is different, the administration is different. Find what is different and special and unique. And it doesn't matter if the school is high performing or low performing or struggling or not. There is some magic there, some spark there. If nothing else, other than that spark you see in those kindergartners when they show up for that first day, right? They just want to learn everything, right? Like those of you who work with kindergartners know this. Like what is cooler than like having somebody experience something for the first time in their lives, right? Like somebody who doesn't know that what a slope is, right? Like all these kind of trivial things we take for granted. That's an amazing thing to connect to. So find that mission and then be vocal about it and make it different and special. The other thing though is that if people are connected to that mission, they work way harder than they will if they don't feel that connection. So Adam Grant is a professor at Wharton, the business school Wharton. And he's a great guy, he's a good friend, and he's like one of these crazy accomplished people who you would hate if he wasn't such a nice human being. Because he was like an Olympic caliber diver and a magician and youngest tenure ever faculty at the university. But his original research was around mission and meaning, and this is what got him tenure. He wanted to quantify, does this stuff really matter? Like there's all these books, Purpose-Driven Life, and you go to church and they tell you about meaning and everyone's like, okay. Everyone kind of performs the same afterwards though. It's not like everybody who does one of these things or reads this book suddenly performs better. So he went to a call center. And this call center was doing fundraising for universities. So you basically hire these folks, you give them your alumni list, and they call everyone in the alumni list saying, can you please donate college to Laszlo University or whatever it is. And these fundraisers were raising $1,300 per week on average for the universities. And Adam thought, if I connect them to meaning, because his research says that works, they will get more productive. So he went out and he found a bunch of students who'd gotten scholarships and said, do a 1-page essay that we're going to give to these people about the impact the scholarship had on you. And he got these beautiful essays back. I went to college, I learned all this stuff, I was able to get this great job, I've lived happily ever after, I've got a family, like life is good. Anyone want to guess what happened to productivity, where it went from 1,300 after these people read these one-page essays? Went down? Pessimist. Anyone else want to guess? Doubled? It's a trick question. It didn't change at all. Our pessimist was close. And they wrote about what they learned and how much money they made. Didn't have an impact at all. And Adam then completely freaked out. Because he was like, oh my God, I'm not going to get tenure. So he went back to the scholarship recipients and he said, write a different essay. Write to me about what it meant. And he got an essay back instead that said, instead of like, oh, I took this Shakespeare class, it was awesome, that said, I read Shakespeare for the first time. And I learned about the English language and where all these phrases we use come from. And I learned something about the human condition and that it's universal and that people hundreds of years ago were going through the same thing I'm going through today. It changed me, it affected me. And now, everybody except our pessimist friend, what do you think happened? No change. It went up. It went up to $3,100 a week, more than doubling, just by reading a one-page essay talking about what this meant. And then he said, oh, I can do better than this. So he had these students come in, these scholarship recipients, once a month to give a 5-minute talk about what it meant. And these fundraisers started raising more than $5,000 every single week. And so Adams replicated this study in a bunch of different settings. He did a similar thing with lifeguards. And he found that lifeguards became 21% more attentive, more time watching, less time Facebook, whatever. He did it with tutors and proofreaders. And he found that when people felt more connected, when proofreaders, editors, read something about how meaningful this was to the person whose paper was being graded and reviewed, they spent 20% more time on every single paper and gave more detailed and substantive comments, just because they could feel that connection. So it's possible to do this in all kinds of different fields. Meaning and finding that meaning and refreshing it and reminding people of it again and again is essential, particularly in a job where most of your time is spent by yourself or maybe with you and an assistant in one setting where you don't have all that interaction all the time. It's not like at Google where you're constantly on a team and you may be on 3 or 4 different teams at the same time and you spend all your time with other people. Rekindling that spark, rekindling that connection. And the way you do it is through narrative and stories and exposing people to this underlying meaning. Second thing I want to talk about is make sure people are learning, which kind of seems self-evident. That's kind of the whole point of teaching. But if you think about it in a corporate environment, and if you're an administrator or a manager, most learning happens either through training programs, and the research on training programs is not good. In the US, large corporations spend $120 billion a year on training classes. $120 billion. And there's not a whole lot of benefit to it. There's certainly almost no measured benefit to it. I mean, if you think back about trainings you've gone to and programs you've gone to, how many of those things do you use every single day? Or if you're, this was, I guess, a 4-week session? Or 4-day session, sorry. 4-day session, not 4-week. If only, 4-day session. Like, play forward in your mind. I'm sure this was well done and the pedagogy was fantastic, but even including this talk, you'll have 4 days of content. It's not like every single moment, every single second is transforming how you do things completely from here on in, right? There's a limited amount we can absorb. And that challenge is compounded by the fact that in professional settings, what typically happens, and in academic settings a lot, is learning is married to consequence. So in a corporate setting, you have a performance review. That's when you get all your feedback, and the manager sits down and you get your performance review, and then they tell you what your salary increase is, or maybe not. So the whole time you're getting feedback, in the back of your mind, you're going like, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man, I want to get a raise. I hope it works out. And what happens is, as soon as you tie learning to consequence, learning shuts down. Because people become defensive. They care about the evaluation. They care about the score, the grade, the doing well. And they focus on that rather than, what can I learn here? Whereas, as many of you know, you learn more from failure than from success, right? Failure is where you dig down and say, what did I do wrong? What can I correct? At Google, we did this thing called the Upward Feedback Survey. And the idea was we did a whole study called Project Oxygen. And it was about what makes managers effective. And it turns out there's 8 things managers do that make them effective. And it's things like have a regular one-on-one with their people, act as a good coach, and so on. So we turned that into a survey. Survey goes to everyone in the company. I hope it still does. Google people, yes, still does? All right, okay. Because this is really important for the company. And it's 10 or 12 questions, does my manager act as a coach? Do we have regular one-on-ones? And every employee takes, it's an optional survey, but just about everyone fills out the survey. The manager gets a score. And the score is how they did on each question, from a strongly agree to strongly disagree. And then there's an aggregate score, which is the average of those. And then the manager's also told where that average falls in the distribution of the company. Because if everyone gets a perfect score, there's still well, not if everyone gets a perfect score, but there's still a distribution, right? Even if everyone's getting 90% favorable or 85 to 95% favorable, there's still a distribution within that. So we tell managers, here's where you are. When we started doing it, their managers were rated 58% favorable. And that's all. We just told them, here's the score, here's where you are in the distribution. You're in the top, middle, top, third, second, or bottom quartile of the company. And that's all we did. Then 6 months later, we measured it again. And managers got better. And we measured it again 6 months after that, and 6 months after 5 cycles, the average favorability rating went from 58% to 78% favorable, which was awesome, because I didn't have to spend any money. What happened was there was no consequence. We just told people, here's what your people think, which you can't debate, because it's their opinion, right? Like, I don't care what you think, and this is how they feel. And here's where you fall in the distribution. We'll see in 6 months. And most people are good people. Most people want to get better. And if you tell them where they are, they'll kind of look at it, and by the way, here's 8 or 10 things to do differently. Here's where your score is. I'm going to do this one that I was lower on. And they got better. It was amazing. There's a school nearby in the town of Los Altos called the Bullis Charter School. And some of you may do this too. In the middle schools, which for them is 6th through 8th grade, anytime a kid takes a math test, they're allowed to retake any questions they got wrong, and they get 50% credit for it. And the principal there, Wanny Hersey, who's amazing, she says, it's important that my students learn algebra and pre-algebra and all these other things they're learning. But she told me it's equally important that they learn how to learn from failure, and that they learn resilience, and that they learn how to recover. So the big lesson here is, and I don't know how much this applies in your world versus in the corporate world. In the corporate world, development needs to be a completely different thing from evaluation. And I know there's like state standards and all this kind of, and there's a, that's a big issue. That's way over my head and area of expertise. But giving people the opportunity to fail and simply learn from it is tremendous. It's the biggest gift you can give them, and they will learn faster and learn more. There's another Google person named Astro Teller, and he runs Google X. And there's a YouTube video of him giving a talk about failure, and it's fantastic. And it's all about all the different things they do at X to encourage people to try things and fail and learn from it. And it's really instructive. It's worth checking out. But the big message here is give people that opportunity to develop, keep it separate from evaluation as much as you can. The last thing I want to talk about is how to have a really big impact on things without a lot of money and without a lot of effort. There's a concept called nudges. So there were 2 professors, Thaler and Sunstein. One's at University of Chicago, one's at Harvard, who wrote a book 10 or 12 years ago called Nudge. And their whole idea was they observed that you can make small changes in the environment or present decisions in a certain way that drives people's behaviors in really, really big ways. And the reason is, it goes back to how much you retain from learning environments and from training programs. We only have so much cognitive capacity. There's only so much we can learn, so much we can remember, so much we can act on. We only have so much willpower at a given time. So if you structure your environment in a certain way or present decisions in a certain way, you can make it easier to make a better decision. So for example, it's really hard to lose weight. Yeah. Yeah. I can see I'm not alone in knowing this and having lived this. It's really hard. Our biology conspires against us. Our peer groups conspire against us. Getting older. I mean, I'm now 44, which, depending, feels a lot older than I was a long time ago, but I know it's like I'm, not even halfway there. And it's just harder to do anything, right? Like a recovery time, my body needs fewer calories. In high school, I was on a swim team. I remember coming home, opening up the jar of peanut butter, like the crunchy style peanut butter, and just eating spoonfuls of it, right? And I literally the other day was with some friends, and we were just sitting around talking about like what we used to be able to eat, right? And we're not that old yet. So it's hard. So here's a nudge, right? If you open up your refrigerator, picture this in your mind, what's sitting on the middle shelf there? The big shelf right in front of you, what's in there? I see people laughing and smiling. You gonna admit it? No. Usually you might have some juice, some milk, maybe some takeout containers, some leftovers from the restaurant last night. Everything that is high in calories, low in nutritional content, right there, because that's the big space. That's where all those big things go, right? Where are your vegetables? Down at the bottom. And no one wants to go in that drawer. Right? Like it's like you don't know what you're going to find. You may have created new life in that drawer, right? And where's the fruit live? Beside of it or on the counter? Counter people? Where on the counter though? Who said counter? In a bowl, and where's that bowl? Yeah. On top of the refrigerator, keep it nice and warm. I like that. Or like behind in some corner where it's out of the way. And you have like some fruit flies. And it's what's that? Yeah. And you've got like you got that peach, that's been there. And it's been there long enough that you don't even want to reach for it because you think your fingers might sink into it. And then you throw it away. You want to eat better. Take the juice out, take out the to-go containers, take out all that stuff. Put your fruit right in the middle. Put some carrots next to it, put some strawberries, some oranges, like right on that big shelf every time you open it. You actually will eat better. And you can still have all the other stuff, but it's just easier because every time you open it, it's staring you in the face, right? Same thing with your pantry, right? Big shelf, sugary cereal, all the easy grab and goes. That's a nudge. And there's lots of applications in businesses and a tremendous, tremendous amount you can do. And it's one of the things that over at Humu we're super, super excited about and doing some cool stuff. I'll give you a Google example just to prove I'm not all about weight loss. So one of the problems we had was we're hiring all these people, and like in your organizations, you want people to get productive as fast as possible, right? Like there's a difference in the quality of and the impact of a brand new teacher versus somebody who's been doing it for 2 or 3 years. And you want them to get up that curve as fast as possible. We wanted the same thing. What we found was the average time from when somebody joined Google to when they were fully productive was 9 months. So we're like, well, what can we do differently? How can we accelerate that? And because we love our science, we did a bunch of analyses about what are these people doing differently, and what are their managers doing differently, what are the teams doing differently, and there's 5 things that they do differently. One thing is they meet at least 2 people in the first couple days, because it turns out building a social network makes a huge difference. And I don't know how it works in teaching, but at Google, you can actually just show up and for 2 days just kind of sit at your desk and hang out. And there's cafes and everything, but if you're an introvert, you're not going to go meet people, so meet 2 people. If you're an engineer, the ones who got productive faster, they checked in code in the first week, meaning they wrote something, checked it in the system, got accepted. Within the first week, made them more productive. Having a computer that works and a desk. Because it turns out, part of what happens is when you're new at an organization, you're particularly open to learning, right? Think about like the kids in the first 2 weeks of school versus like 3/4 of the way. I mean, they're still there, they're still interested. First 2 weeks though, you can teach them anything. He was, I don't know what he was the principal's son, and he was in the classroom for some reason. And I remember, this is in like 2nd or 3rd grade, and he was like, in the future, we're gonna be able to, doctors will cut slits in the side of your neck and we'll all breathe water like Aquaman. And for like 2 years, I believed that, right? Because it was early and I liked Aquaman, and I was like, that'd be really cool. So people are more open to learning early on. They do a whole bunch of other things. So one option was build all this special training. Well, we already had an onboarding process, and it was giving us 9 months to full productivity. So instead, we said, what's the nudge? What's a small intervention we can have to change behavior? So we sent a couple emails. So anytime, and I don't know if this is still true, so Google people keep me honest. When a new employee gets hired, the day before the first day, they get an email that says, here's 5 things to do. that we've shown, I see, okay, head nodding, awesome, that we know make people more productive sooner. The manager gets an email 2 or 3 days before so that they're ready that says, here are 5 things that you should help them with. Because you can't rely on the employee, the new hire, paying attention, because often they do, sometimes they don't. But if you get to both sides of the equation, you're much more likely to have an effect. And what happened was the time to productivity shrank from 9 months down to 6 months. Which on the one hand, percentage terms, that's a big improvement. On the other hand, yeah, 3 months, who cares? At the rate at which Google hires, and if you look at average employee lifespan, it's a 2% productivity boost across the entire company. 2% is like for every 50 employees you have, you get a free person, right? So think about like what that means for your schools, right? That's actually like, that's a lot of free bodies, right? So that's another example of a small intervention. So what does that look like in education? I'm going to go out on a limb here, so don't get too mad. So I went out and I Googled my search engine of choice. I Googled, let me get the exact phrase right, what was it? I Googled children in classroom. And this is what I got. I imagine this is what most of your classrooms look like. You know, look like, what is that, like a 9-to-1 teacher-student ratio? And yeah, lots of technology. Oh, I didn't even notice that. Yeah, they've got crazy technology. You've got, it's clean. Oh man, you guys are breaking my heart. There's 4 walls and everyone's fully clothed and it's, I mean, I joke, I make light of it, but that's like a real issue. So in East Palo Alto, like, so you got Palo Alto where Stanford is, you cross the 101 freeway, you have East Palo Alto. My wife and my daughter, one of my girls does volunteer work over there. More than 30% of the kids in that school district are homeless. And I don't mean they live on the street every day. I mean, they don't know where they're going to sleep that night. Could be in the car, could be in a friend's house, right? That's 5 miles from here, right? So, I don't know, how much is Google worth? $600 billion, $800 billion, right? You got Apple down the street worth almost $1 trillion, 5 miles from here. More than 30% of the kids. So I'm joking a little, but you all live this, right? Like this is, and who's raising their hands in this picture, right? You've got the 2 girls raising their hands. Who really raises the hands first? First time you ask a question in a classroom, whose hands are like, ooh, me. Who, is it the girls or the boys? It's the boys. I see the men raising their hands in the room. This is what it's more like, I think, in an actual classroom. I tried to find a more realistic depiction of a, California classroom. There's a couple of problems where I think nudging and things like checklists, like that manager feedback survey I talked about, might actually help a lot with, which I've kind of alluded to. Who gets called on first in classrooms? Whose hands are up most? Boys, right? Boys' hands go up. And it's because, on average, and this is based on the science, this isn't me just making stuff up. This is, we had an incredible people analytics team. So anytime before I would talk about this stuff, while I was still here, I would go back to the team and say, can you just make sure this is true? And like scientifically validated and correct and not based on like what I'd happen to see down the street, but like in fact true across humanity. Boys raise their hands earlier, and so do men. Because boys and men aren't as hindered by certainty or knowledge as women. Men are more likely to go like, oh, I think I know the answer. Whereas girls in classrooms wait longer until they're sure of the answer. And what happens is it creates this vicious cycle. Because if I'm the teacher and I ask a question, 2 + 2, why is an apple red, whatever, and the hands that come up are boys, I want to call on somebody. And it's kind of weird and awkward to go like, okay, boys, I want to hear from one of the girls, because that also is like a weird way of isolating people. So I'll call on a boy. And we'll go like, oh, 2 + 2, that's 8. I go, no, that's wrong. And meanwhile, the girls know the answer. And I'll keep calling on boys, but what's happened is 2 things. The boy has gotten positive encouragement, positive reinforcement, right? He raised his hand, stimulus response. Teacher called on him, positive. The teacher has also gotten positive reinforcement. I asked a question, this person raised their hand. And you know what? It wasn't the right answer, but look, they're trying. They're engaged. They're connected. And over time, we call more on the boys than the girls. And it makes it harder. And the girls also get a message, which is like, I'm not going to bother. And what's crazy is I was at an event at a girls' school, girls' high school. And the science teacher was doing a demonstration. It was for a bunch of adults. So a mixed group of men and women in the classroom. Female science teacher. And the demonstration was she had an aquarium, fish tank, and she had, I think it was a lemon and a lime. And the question is, when I put this in the water, is it going to float or sink? Might have been a lime and an orange. It was 2 citrus fruits. I remember that for sure. And she said, what's going to happen? And was one going to sink, one can float? What do you all think? And in the audience, whose hands went up? All the dudes, right? Not me, because I knew this. I was like, I'm not raising my. I know they went up, and even though it was a girls' school, and all she does is teach girls, she called on the men first. And it speaks to the fact that this is just how we're wired. This is just society, right? Like this is, on average, boys are more risk-seeking. This is part of why, if you look at birth rates, there's more boys born than girls for every 100 childbirths. We have a slightly higher birth rate of boys than girls as a species, and it's because, roll the clock back 10,000 years, who's more likely to die, right? Like boys are more likely to die because, we're more risk-seeking and we do stupid things, and then once you have hunter-gatherer societies, there's a division of labor and so on. So, the reward, we are wired. We boys and men are wired to like, I'm going to just, put it out there, right? Just a little bit more on average than women. And if you look at the population distributions, there's a lot of overlap, right? So it's not true that every boy is more wired than every girl. There's a lot of overlap. But we create these vicious cycles where this happens in the classroom. There's roots of this too, not just in the classroom. And so part of the answer to addressing this kind of issue and the application of nudges isn't just, it's not your responsibility. There's a book that just came out recently called Everybody Lies. And it was written by somebody who basically his whole trick is, and it's a good trick, is he looks at, there's a product that Google has called, it used to be called Google Trends, and it's also called Ngram, N-G-R-A-M, which lets you look at search frequency. So what are people searching for? And the underlying data from that is what informs when you start typing in Google and it starts auto-filling in everything you're doing. Same data. So his whole trick is he thinks that better reveals who we are than what we say on Facebook, for example, right? Because Facebook is who we want to be. It's like, oh, here's some shots from my vacation, and look at my avocado toast this morning, and my kid won this award, right? What we search for on Google, nobody else sees. And his 2 big areas of study in this book, he talks about politics and the recent election, actually the last 3 elections, and quite frankly, he talks a lot about sex. Because apparently people use the internet for that. I did not know that. But apparently people search for that. But there's 2 pages in his book where he talks about education. And he said, if you look at parents of small children, if the search query is, my child is a genius, or is my child a genius, or is my child gifted, parents of boys are 2.5 times more likely to enter, is my child gifted, than parents of girls. Which is weird, because at young ages, girls have better vocabularies, perform better in schools, and are 9% more likely to be in gifted programs. If you look at the search query, is my child overweight, they're much more likely to look for that if it's a girl than if it's a boy, even though there are more overweight young girls than there are overweight young boys. It's something like 39 versus 33%. And I'm a parent, I screw this stuff up too. I've never done those 2 searches, just for the record, but this is just the society we live in. This is like the air we breathe, and it's how we have evolved. It's who we are. It's like, like at the end of the day, again, 10,000 years ago, you see somebody coming towards you, if it's somebody you know who looks like you, sounds like you, the optimal decision is to assume they're more like you. If it's somebody who looks different, who's not from your tribe, who has some, it's a little safer to be a little cautious, just like how we're wired. But today we got to overcome this stuff because it shows up at home and in the classrooms. And what I would posit, what I would put to you, is that one of the ways to address this stuff in the classroom, in addition to everything else that's being done, is small interventions and small nudges and small actions. One of the ways we tackled this at Google when it came to things like performance ratings, so the way ratings happened at Google was, I'm a manager, I give my employee a rating, but before it's final, I sit down with a bunch of other managers and we all discuss our ratings. And there's all these things that happen in our brain, independent of gender ethnicity, that cause us to make bad decisions. There's something called recency bias. And you have this in education too. If I just had a meeting with someone and it was awesome, and then 2 days later I'm doing performance reviews, I'm going to give them a higher rating because I just had this meeting with Sally, she was fantastic, and now, of course she's awesome. It doesn't matter what she did the prior 6 or 12 months. It's recency bias. Same thing in classrooms. You have a great interaction with the kid on the playground or something happens, you're more likely to assess them better subconsciously, particularly on qualitative subjects, right? Math is math, but everything else, it's tough. This stuff shows up. So what we did was we had a one-page handout with here's a bunch of biases, and you just have this in front of you when you do ratings. And it reminds you, it's a trigger, it's a nudge, and a checklist that says here's a better way to do it. So, and this I say again with this part with humility, because in this field you are the experts. I just have an opinion, and everyone's got one of those. But I would imagine there's a lot of small things you can do in terms of, and I would do it in terms of try one thing for 3 months. It's not like here's 6 things we're going to do to revamp things. But if you believe what I shared with you about boys and girls raising their hands, tell teachers hey, for the next month, make sure that you alternate calling on a boy or girl. Just keep it 50-50. Or you can go 2-to-1 the other way if you really want to be crazy. But just try it. And then at the end of the month, let's all sit together and see if that made a difference. And if you want to get sciencey about it, say okay, we're going to give the kids test on something or measurement of their trajectory and see if that trajectory has changed, right? Or compare first and second trimester performance or something like that. But a small intervention like that can have a huge, huge impact. So pick small things people can do. And the second thing is then remind them about this stuff over time. Maybe there's 2 or 3 you rotate through over a year. Or maybe there's maybe there's a handout people use. Maybe there's a checklist. But keep coming back to it periodically. And you will see changes. But it's these little tiny things which it turns out are actually easy to do in the moment, as long as you don't swamp people with a lot of direction, that have a huge impact, tremendous impact on what's going on. So the last thing, I guess there were actually 4 things. This last thing, number 10, go back to number 1. So all of this is iterative. So figure out what your purpose is, and think about nudges and small interventions, and constantly kind of iterate. Try it, go back and do it again. Try it, go back and do it again. Because it's a lifelong process, and each time you go through this cycle, you'll get better. One of the challenges when you're trying to build organizations or build individual capability is it's not a linear path. And you know this from teaching, right? It's not like someone gets 10% smarter every year, and then at the end of 10 years, they're 100% smarter, or whatever the compounding would be, right? They learn, they slow down, they go on summer vacation, they come back, they've forgotten everything you taught them, you have to start from scratch. So you have to keep iterating, kind of moving through this. There's one other resource which I want to offer to you, and it's not mine, but it's free. One of the things we were big on while I was here, and I hope continues, was a focus on open sourcing and sharing people practices, not just from Google, but from lots of other organizations. So there's a website called Rework, and you can see the address. It's g.co/rework, where none of the things that I've talked about are there exactly as I've talked about them, but the manager checklist stuff is there, and so there's a lot of other things. And there's also things that Google partnered with a lot of nonprofit organizations and government organizations to do, and also that we just learned from them, or I should say they learned from them, so I'm no longer there. So it's free, it's available. And then of course, we'll be up to stuff over at humu.com if you're interested in that kind of topic. But more than anything, it's an honor and privilege to be here. And I was not kidding around when I said, you have the most important jobs there are. I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of engineers here building stuff, and there's a bunch of salespeople, and there's lots of jobs. But you actually shape the future in a way that nobody else on the planet does. And just like we spend more time at work than we do anywhere else, our children spend more time at school than they do doing any other single thing. And it's a bastion of, go back to East Palo Alto, it's a bastion of consistency and safety and security and positive adult role models. Like the kids in Palo Alto, the town itself, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. It's all the other kids, the other 70 or 80% of the kids out there that you're serving. And it's an honor to be able to talk to you a little bit about this stuff. And I'm incredibly grateful as a kid who went up through public education for all the work all of you do. So I'll pause there and we can take questions and chat about whatever else you might like. Thank you. And I'm only going to call on the women. So, so guys, don't worry about it. You're good. Yeah. Thank you.
You mentioned about learning more from failure than from success. Where is a place that you have failed and have learned the most?
Oh my God. Do you mean today or do you mean like in general? No, I screwed something up at home this morning. I actually every day I use my commute home to think about what I learned that day and what went wrong. I guess since I'm at Google, there were a couple things I was wrong about. One was that I learned. We developed this unconscious bias program to help sort of people be more aware of their biases at the company. And I remember telling the team, we got to make this mandatory. This is important. Like everyone should be aware of this. And the team was like, don't make it mandatory because people will like totally shut down. And I was wrong. So we did not make it mandatory. About 60% of the company went through the program voluntarily in the first 6 months or so. And what was crazy was that was enough to change the tenor and conversation inside the company. I mean, it didn't make Google perfect, but what happened was suddenly you'd be in like meetings and somebody would interrupt a woman or a white person would interrupt a black person. And a white or Indian person in the company would go like, no, that's not cool, let her finish. And so it showed up in these small ways, and I was wrong in that I thought you had to force it. But number one, turns out people learn better when you don't, which was what inspired this part of the talk. But the second was, I also thought we had to have everyone learn. And it turns out we didn't. You just had to get to enough of the people that the culture changes and that some things which were previously acceptable are no longer acceptable. And it just like, it blew my mind. Great question. What else? Yeah.
So in your mission, you said that it was to find people, to grow them, and to keep them.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, a lot of the things that we've been through the last few days, we can see why you're keeping them, why Google keeps them, and grows them as a professional. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you find people and what that process is like?
Yeah, so the question was, going back to find, grow, keep, you've got an exposure to how Google keeps them. We feed them a lot. But how do you actually find them? So there's a few things. When the company was small, there was a huge focus on go to all the fancy schools, hire all the people with fancy pedigrees, high test scores. That was efficient, but wrong. Because 2/3 of people in this country don't finish college, right? So a third don't ever go, a third do some, a third do. And there's really talented, amazing people out there. Then there's all the biases that cause you to overlook people and so on. And your top performer at a state school is going to be way better than your average performer, or even top 10% performer, often at places like Harvard and so on. So we started looking at many different places. And part of that, one of the lessons there was that it took real investment to build relationships. So the first year we went to Howard University to try to recruit, we had exactly 0 people hired from Howard for internships, for anything else. And what we realized was what the students told us was like, yeah, you're Google, but you just showed up. And Microsoft had been there for 15 years, and Goldman Sachs had been, all these other companies. So we had to invest and build a relationship. So lesson one is we went to places that we had not gone to before. And that's actually expanded. I think Google, when I was last here, was recruiting at something like 700 different schools around the world. So casting a really wide net, internet makes it a lot cheaper. And actually the Google for Jobs that's now integrated into search that we worked on when I was here, that makes it much easier because it'll scrape up your job. The second was we changed the hiring standard from, I almost said, what do you look like? It was never explicitly like physically what do you look like, but what do you look like in terms of, did you go to these right schools and have these right scores, to what's our assessment of your capability? And there's 4 attributes everyone gets screened at for. I think these are still the same 4. Yes. It's only been 7 months, but who knows? Yeah. So general cognitive ability, which is not an IQ test. It's problem solving and how quickly can they absorb and integrate information. Emergent leadership, which is different from leadership. Leadership is, I'm in charge, right? And I was president of this and captain of this, and that is leadership. Emergent leadership is, I see a problem, I'm going to step in, I'm going to help, my piece is done, I'm going to step out and let somebody else take the lead. The third is what we used to call googliness. And googliness has 2 components. Intellectual humility, which is, you can have a big ego and be here, but you have to be willing to admit you're wrong when presented with new information, right? And the second is conscientiousness. Because if you look at the science on what predicts job performance, the best predictor is actually having them do the job, duh. The next best is cognitive ability, so how do they learn? And the best thing to add to that is conscientiousness. Do they care about the environment around them? Do they care about the people? The least important thing was actual experience in the field and expertise in the field. Because it turns out if you have those first things, you can develop that last thing. And then the other last big change that happened was when we were small, most of the hires were from referrals. And we found that as we got bigger, referrals dried up. Referrals were also really homogenous, right? My friends are all going to like the same teams and all this kind of stuff. So we built a pretty significant capability to go out and actually find people that we call sourcing. And so it's all about just going out and finding people. Because the very best people aren't looking for work, right? Like all of you, right? Like you're here because you're really, really good. And you're not picking up the phone. You're not sending out resumes. You're valued by your organizations. You're doing good, important, meaningful work. But you're the people, if you wanted to build like the best school on the planet, you would hire. So that's harder to do with the resources in an academic environment. What I would offer, suggest, make up is what you don't often see is different schools pooling resources in these kinds of ways. Because in a way, like if you have schools within like a 10-mile radius or 5-mile radius, not every school is going to be hiring for every position every year, but they all should constantly be kind of looking. And so if you start sharing candidates or even had like a shared person at the district level whose whole job is to go out and like spend time on LinkedIn or look at other school districts or what have you, who's constantly generating a stream of people, even if you only need that person once every 2 years, you're sharing the cost with everybody else, and then you have that capability. Yeah, great question.
Google, the employee survey you mentioned a little bit ago, is that public? Can other people see that, those 8 questions? And how do you rate the impact of that on the Google? You're number 1 for 7, 10 years now, so what's been the impact of just getting that feedback?
So yeah, the question was this management survey, is that public? Is that available? And the second was, what's the impact? How big an impact has that had on kind of the rankings as number 1 employer and how people feel about the company? Is that fair? So it is public, completely public. So it was one of the first things we shared, and the public name was the internal name, which you can Google, is Project Oxygen, because the idea is good managers are as essential as oxygen. There's resources on the Rework site. There's also, if you just Google Project Oxygen New York Times, there's a great New York Times write-up. They actually eventually did a Harvard Business Review case. But if you just look at the New York Times write-up, it's got the 8 factors, and then there's 3 factors which are really bad indicators. And it's basically, you ask, does the manager do these things, or does the employee do these things? And then whatever your scale is, high to low, agree to disagree, that's it. And then you just sort of, everybody gets a report back that says, here's your score on this question, and here's the average of these scores, and here's how your average compares to everyone else's average. That's the whole thing. But if you go on the Rework site, you can find it, or the New York Times article was great for it. I think that's one of the more impactful things we did, because it touched everyone. There was a clear measurable effect, so it was kind of self-reinforcing. And one of the hard things about leading large organizations is there's very rarely a one-size-fits-all answer. And even in small organizations, that's tough. And what was beautiful about this was I didn't have to know what training to send you to or which of these things you were weak on, or across the 5,000 managers when we started doing this, like who was good at what and customize. I just told everyone, these are the things. And then this goes back to the freedom is free thing. You get better at it. You figure out how to get better, right? The trick was, and this is not in the New York Times write-up, the last question on the survey is always, my manager shares these results with me. Because that makes the manager accountable to the team. And the only way you get 100% is if you're really good at sharing the results back. And that then causes the manager to improve, work on it, get better. But yeah, that had a really big impact. I do think the rankings are a little like goofy. Like I mean, it's always like the high-rated companies that are like, oh, the rankings don't matter, you know. But I think there's some weirdness behind it, so yeah, take that with a grain of salt. What else? If anything, how are we on time?
Maybe time for one more question, if anybody has it. Otherwise,
Any last questions?
burning questions. All right. Well then,
there
we
was-
got one.
Is that okay? One quick one?
As principal of low-income kids, what can I do to prepare them for a job here?
As principal of low-income kids, what can I do to prepare them for a job here? The research suggests the most important thing that kids learn in sort of pre-K through 2nd or 4th grade is our social and emotional skills, not the academic skills. The ability to function in a team, the ability to delay gratification, the ability to show resilience in the face of failure. Those are, if you look at what incomes are, 15 and 20 years out, and job level attained, those are the things that most predict performance. Sorry? Yeah, they were resilience in the face of failure. What did I say? I like. Well, social emotional skills is a high one, but then the examples were, there's a whole cluster of things underneath that. So team and collaboration skills, what was the second one? Self-regulation, yeah. There goes my credibility. But no, those are the attributes which stick with you throughout life. For Google specifically, and then I'll close with one other thing, which your question just reminded me of, because it relates to low-income kids. To get into Google, it's funny. I always used to like index high. Like actually at Humu, I just hired somebody because what I saw in their resume was that they went to San Jose State. So bachelor's and master's at San Jose State. And they did well and strong academic performance for our people science team. But the reason I zeroed in on that for this young woman was you go to a state school for a couple reasons. One is you're smart, but you don't have the role models to tell you like, here's the process and here's how you navigate it, which I didn't have. I lucked into it. Or you just don't have the money. And so I meet her, we start interviewing, we hire her, she's amazing, and then eventually I ask her like, what's your story? And she's in her late 20s, she's had 13 jobs. All the time she was an undergrad, she was a manager at a Claire's, like in a mall, one of these earring places. She said she's pierced over 2,000 ears. So when I was at Google, one of the things I'd look for is if somebody went to a community college then transferred, that's a signal. If somebody went to a state school and performed well, that's a signal. If somebody had a job that was not, I went to Kenya and helped build churches, but the job was like, I worked at a gas and sip, I worked at a 7-Eleven, I wanted to see those kids. The ideal path, of course, is you do well academically. So the conventional advice, and this is like for any company, the way to stand out, so for Google, perform well at whatever you are, show an increasing rate of progression in your results. So not just I did well here and I did well here, but I did well here faster, right? Once you're in the workforce, if you're getting promoted faster than every 2 years, that's a good signal. But for students, absolutely say like, identify if you're from a low-income household, identify if you're the first in your family, identify, and it's not about writing a sob story, it's just like, this is the context, right? That's really, really important. The generic advice is for most organizations, so Google's a bit of a special case, and I'm biased. Most organizations focus on brands, and they focus on academics and all these stupid things. So the way to cheat your way on that side is, because not everyone gets to work for like, Procter & Gamble or some fancy brand everyone's gonna recognize, is wherever you work, try to do project work that connects to a fancy brand, and mention that in the bullet points on your resume or your application. Because people will be scanning that, and the first people who kind of make it through the filter, again, not at Google, but like in the real world. The first people are the people who went to all the right schools and right companies. The next people are the people whose resumes mention those words, and they get called up. And then eventually you get to everybody else. So that signaling and branding is really important. The thing I'll close on, if I can, actually, my wife has a friend named Michelle Colbert-Krantz, who's the principal of a school called La Mesa Junior High School in Santa Clarita, California. So it's a few hundred miles south of here. It's just north of Los Angeles. And largely Hispanic school, largely low-income school. She wanted to be at that school for those reasons. And she does a couple things that are really amazing. And the students love her, and the school is now a high-performing school. It's a lot of work. She greets every kid every morning, shakes their hand, looks them in the eye, says their name. And the other thing she does, and I was reminded of it because you guys had these. And all I could see was this kind and brave. So she does this thing where, and you know, there's like kind bars, right? So what Michelle does is, and she's done this for years, she gives out kudos bars. Because she doesn't have a budget. It's a low-income school. So she like goes to Costco, buys like 40 kudos bars, and when she sees a kid doing something well, or she sees a staff member doing something well, she like carries 3 or 4 in her pocket, right? She just gives the kid. And what's wild is they don't always eat them. Because it's a trophy. It's a memento. It means something, right? And it costs almost nothing, right? Those are the small nudges, the small interventions. It is incredibly hard. Like, you guys don't get the kids for that long. I mean, you're the source of stability, but you don't actually have them for that long. They're in your classroom, then they move on. And teaching is a solitary profession in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you're doing what you do in your classroom. Yes, you can compare notes. Yes, you can do, but it's like you doing this thing, and let me try something differently this year, and I'll know in 20 years if it was a good idea. Like, that's really hard. But there's so many small, little things that stick with people. And for those of you who are administrators, I know you're all going to be coaches. And I don't know what the content is that you guys had, so I hope I don't screw it up. But really try to focus in. My advice would be, what are the small things you can ask people to change? And that they can try again and again and run in small experiments. So they try something, go try this for 2 weeks. Let's talk again, see how it works. Now stop doing it for 2 weeks. Because you want the people on the other end to experience not just that it worked, if it worked, but you want them to experience what happens if you take it away, right? So do the 50-50 calling on kids, then stop. See what happens. Because you want people to feel this if you want to change behavior. You want that connection. And I can't wait to hear what you all do. Super exciting. So thank you all for having me here.